Bulamwini, right now, Amazon can scan your face without your consent, all of our faces without our consent, and sell it to the government, all without our knowledge, correct?
Yes.
And, Mr. Chair, I'd like to seek unanimous consent on how Amazon actually met with ICE officials over facial recognition system that could identify immigrants. I'd like to submit this to the congressional record.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. Ms. Garvey, in fact, it's not just Amazon that's doing this, right? It's Facebook, it's Microsoft, it's a very large amount of tech corporations, correct?
That's correct.
And do you think it's fair to say that Americans are essentially being spied on and surveilled on a massive scale without their consent or knowledge?
I would make a bit of a distinction between what Facebook and other companies are doing, but yielding to Ms. Bulamwini for more specifics on this. I will say most of the law enforcement agency systems operate on DMV databases or mugshot databases, so information that has been collected by agencies rather than companies.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And Mr. Ferguson, one of the prime constitutional concerns about the non-consensual use of facial recognition technology is rooted or alluded to in the 14th Amendment, correct?
That's correct, it's one of them.
And right now, companies, governments, agencies can essentially steal or use your biometric data from you without your consent. And this is outrageous, right? Because this is America, and we have a right to privacy. Isn't that right, Ms. Koliani?
That's absolutely right.
And Ms. Koliani, what was the Supreme Court case that identified the right to privacy?
It's been, I don't remember the original one, but I mean, there's been a series of cases where the court has essentially said, look, with modern technology, it shouldn't mean that we don't have Fourth Amendment rights.
Yes, and what was there a landmark Supreme Court decision that established that we've seen recently?
You know, we've seen the Carpenter case where the court said that it was unconstitutional to warrantlessly surveil individuals. We've seen cases where the court has also said that you can't search a cell phone without a warrant
And
into arrest.
most specifically, with relation to the 14th Amendment, it was Roe v. Wade that established the right to privacy. Is that correct?
Roe v. Wade, the right to privacy was addressed there as well.
Right. So, we don't just have, because that right to privacy is alluded to, part of the case in our right to privacy is that this doesn't just give us a right to my uterus. It gives me a right to my hand and my shoulders, my heads, my knees, my toes, and my face. And so in some ways, part of the case, although it's not all of it, there's a great deal rooted in the 14th Amendment with search and seizure, but in our right to privacy, we also see here that this is about our entire body, our right to our entire body. And the similar principle that keeps a legislator out of my womb is the same principle that would keep Facebook and algorithms off of all of our faces. And so do you think it's fair to draw that connection?
I think that when we're talking about privacy, it is important to think about more than our face, right? So we're seeing the FBI use things like voice recognition and gait recognition, all different types of biometrics that I think fundamentally raise some of the same privacy concerns that have been talked about by all the panelists today.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Bulamwini, I heard your opening statement, and we saw that these algorithms are effective to different degrees. So are they most effective on women?
No,
Are they most effective on people of color?
absolutely not.
Are they most effective on people of different gender expressions?
No, in fact, they exclude them.
So what demographic is it mostly effective on?
White men.
And who are the primary engineers and designers of these algorithms?
Definitely white men.
So we have a technology that was created and designed by one demographic that is only mostly effective on that one demographic, and they're trying to sell it and impose it on the entirety of the country.
So we have the pale-male data sets being used as something that's universal when that isn't actually the case when it comes to representing the full sepia of humanity.
And do you think that this could exacerbate the already egregious inequalities in our criminal justice system?
It already is.
Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
How so?
So right now, because you have the propensity for these systems to misidentify Black individuals or brown communities more often, and you also have confirmation bias, where if I have been said to be a criminal, that I am more targeted. So there's a case with Mr. Ba, an 18-year-old African-American man who was misidentified in Apple stores as a thief. And in fact, he was falsely arrested multiple times because of this kind of misidentification. And then if you have a case where we're thinking about putting, let's say, facial recognition technology on police body cams in a situation where you already have racial bias, that can be used to confirm, right, the presumption of guilt, even if that hasn't necessarily been proven, because you have these algorithms that we already have sufficient information showing fail more on communities of color.
Ms. Ocasio Cortez is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Sloan, earlier today you said that Wells Fargo does not put profits over people, correct?
That's correct.
I'm interested in the human rights abuses and environmental disasters that some say are financed by your bank, Wells Fargo. In a recent Guardian article by Crystal Tubles and Matt Remley, they stated, Wells Fargo has pursued profits without principles by investing in private prisons, for-profit immigration detention centers, loan shark-like payday lending, and holding much of the bond debt, strangling Puerto Rico's efforts to lift itself out of its financial crisis. Is it true that Wells Fargo has invested or financed in some of these industries?
We made a decision 2 years ago to exit the 2 relationships that we had with 2 private prison firms. One has been exited, and then when the credit agreement with the other one amortizes and matures, we will no longer have that relationship.
Are those 2 companies Geo Group and CoreCivic?
Correct.
And which one has been exited, Geo Group or CoreCivic?
I can't recall exactly which one. But,
Okay.
Yep.
Madam Chair, I'd like to seek unanimous consent to submit 3 reports highlighting the bank's role in debt financing these groups, the for-profit prison companies running ICE detention facilities.
Without objection, such is the order.
Mr. Sloan, why was the bank involved in the caging of children and financing the caging of children to begin with?
I don't know how to answer that question because we weren't.
So in finance, you were financing and involved in debt financing of CoreCivic and Geo Group, correct?
For a period of time, we were involved in financing one of the firms. We're not anymore, and the other. I'm not familiar with the specific assertion that you're making, but we weren't directly involved in that.
Okay, so these companies run private detention facilities run by ICE, which is involved in caging children. But I'll move on. Mr. Sloan, Wells Fargo was also an investor, a major investor in the Dakota Access Pipeline and the Keystone XL pipelines. They were prime investors and lenders to companies building these pipelines in defiance of Standing Rock Sioux's treaty rights to protect its water and sacred lands. They warned early on, the Lakota Sioux warned early on that the pipeline was unstable and bound to leak. Despite that, it was built anyway, and it has leaked at least 5 times. And the Keystone XL in particular had one leak that leaked 210,000 gallons across South Dakota. Since Wells Fargo financed the building of this pipeline in an environmentally unstable way, why shouldn't the bank be held responsible for financing the cleanup of the disasters from these projects?
Which pipeline are you referring to?
Either.
So we were not involved in the financing of the XL pipeline. We were one of the 17 or 19 banks that was involved in the financing of the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Okay, so Wells Fargo hasn't financed any company associated with the Keystone XL pipeline?
No, I didn't say
Okay.
that. I said we're not involved in financing that pipeline specifically.
Okay, so let's focus on the Dakota Access Pipeline. Should Wells Fargo be held responsible for the damages incurred by climate change due to the financing of fossil fuels and these projects?
I don't know how you'd calculate that, Congresswoman.
Say from spills, or when we have to reinvest in infrastructure, building seawalls from the erosion of from the erosion of infrastructure or cleanups, wildfires, et cetera?
Related to that pipeline, I'm not aware that there's been any of what you described that's occurred related
How
to that
about
pipeline.
the cleanups from the leaks of the Dakota Access Pipeline?
I'm not aware of the leaks associated with the Dakota Access Pipeline that you're describing.
So hypothetically, if there was a leak from the Dakota Access Pipeline, why shouldn't Wells Fargo pay for the cleanup of it, since it paid for the construction of the pipeline itself?
Because we don't operate the pipeline. We provide financing to the company that's operating the pipeline. Our responsibility is to ensure that at the time that we make that loan, that customer, and we have a group of people in Wells Fargo, including an environmental oversight group headed by one of my colleagues who used to be at the EPA.
So
to
one
ensure
question,
that our-
why did Wells Fargo finance this pipeline when it was widely seen to be environmentally unstable?
Again, the reason that we were one of the 17 or 19 banks that financed that is because our team reviewed the environmental impact, and we concluded that it was a risk that we were willing to take.